My beloved child, before this night is over, you must understand why the person you love suddenly went silent when your name was spoken in a room where another future had already been prepared for them. They had been introduced to someone new for marriage. Everyone expected a polite smile, a careful conversation, and perhaps the beginning of a relationship that would finally remove you from their heart. But instead, one unexpected sentence about you caused their hands to tremble beneath the table and forced them to question everything they had been told. The meeting took place in a home filled with warm light and quiet expectations. The curtains had been drawn against the evening rain, cups of tea rested on polished wooden trays, and relatives moved through the room with the nervous excitement of people who believed they were arranging something important. The person you love sat near the window, listening as others discussed families, responsibilities, careers, and the practical details of a possible marriage. Their expression remained calm, but beneath that calm was a thought they could not silence. Why does this feel like I am agreeing to a life that belongs to someone else? The new person sitting across from them was kind. That made the moment more difficult, not easier. There was no obvious reason to reject the introduction. They spoke gently, answered questions with confidence, and seemed to possess every quality that would look perfect on paper. Around the room, approving glances were exchanged. Someone smiled as though the outcome had already been decided. Yet the person you love found themselves noticing strange, insignificant details: the ticking clock, the rain tracing silver lines down the glass, the untouched cup cooling between their fingers because looking directly at this possible future felt almost dishonest. They tried to participate. They asked a few questions. They offered brief, respectful replies. But every answer sounded distant to their own ears. When the new person described the life they hoped to build, the person you love imagined a doorway, a quiet kitchen, shared mornings, and years passing in predictable peace. It should have comforted them. Instead, an image of you appeared without warning, not as a perfect memory, but as something painfully real. Your voice. The way you once looked at them when neither of you knew what to say. The unfinished feeling that had remained between you like a sentence interrupted before its most important word. No one in that room knew how often they had tried to erase that feeling. They had told themselves that time would do it. Distance would do it. Pride would do it. They believed that if they stopped asking about you, stopped revisiting old conversations, and stopped wondering whether you still cared, your presence would slowly fade. For a while, they even convinced others that it had worked. They laughed at the right moments. They accepted invitations. They allowed their family to speak about marriage as though their heart were an empty room waiting to be furnished. But that evening, as the introduction continued, they realized something unsettling. You had not disappeared from their heart. You had simply become the subject they were most afraid to examine. Then the conversation shifted. An older relative leaned forward and asked the new person what loyalty meant to them. It was an ordinary question, the kind families often ask during such meetings, but the answer caused a subtle change in the room. The new person said loyalty meant choosing what was peaceful and leaving behind anything complicated. Several people nodded approvingly. The person you love lowered their eyes, because the word complicated had been used about you before. You had been described as uncertain, difficult to understand, too emotionally distant at times, too intense at others. People had offered opinions about your silence without knowing what you were carrying. They had interpreted your caution as indifference and your hesitation as rejection. Little by little, those interpretations had entered the heart of the person you love. Not completely, but enough to make them doubt what they once felt so clearly. That doubt was the reason they had agreed to sit in this room. They did not come because they had forgotten you. They came because they were tired of defending a connection that had never been given a clear name. They were tired of waking with questions no one could answer. They wanted certainty, even if certainty meant choosing a life that did not awaken their deepest emotions. Yet as they listened to everyone praising peace, stability, and simplicity, they began to wonder whether they were seeking peace or merely escaping the risk of hearing the truth from you. The first interruption came from someone who had arrived late. The front door opened. Cool air moved through the hallway, carrying the scent of wet earth. A family acquaintance entered, apologizing for the delay. They greeted everyone, removed their rain-damp coat, and took the last empty chair. At first, nothing seemed unusual. But when their eyes met those of the person you love, recognition flickered across their face. They knew you. Not closely, perhaps, but enough. The person you love noticed it immediately. Their posture changed. Their fingers tightened around the edge of their sleeve. For several minutes, the acquaintance said nothing about you. They joined the conversation, accepted a cup of tea, and listened as the families discussed whether the two people should meet again. But there was a question forming behind their expression, and the person you love could sense it. Why are you sitting here when your heart is somewhere else? No one asked that question aloud. Not yet. Instead, the acquaintance casually mentioned where they had been earlier that day. They spoke of a community event, a small gathering where people had come together to help a family facing a difficult season. It seemed unrelated to the marriage introduction until they described one person who had stayed behind after everyone else left. They did not say your name immediately. They described how this person had carried boxes in the rain without asking for attention. How they had quietly paid for something the struggling family could not afford. How they had refused to let anyone announce what they had done. The acquaintance smiled and said, "Some people are misunderstood because they never explain the good they do." The person you love stopped breathing for a moment. They already knew. Before your name was spoken, something inside them recognized you. The room continued around them, but their awareness narrowed to the acquaintance's voice. They remembered how often you had hidden your burdens behind simple answers. They remembered moments when you disappeared without explanation, and how quickly others had assumed the worst. They had been hurt by your silence, but they had never seriously considered that your silence might have protected more than your pride. Then the acquaintance said your name. It fell into the room softly, yet it changed the weight of everything. The person you love looked up so quickly that several relatives noticed. One of them shifted uncomfortably. Another attempted to redirect the conversation, but the acquaintance continued, unaware or perhaps fully aware of what had been happening before their arrival. They explained that you had spoken briefly while helping the family. Someone had teased you about marriage, asking why a person with your heart had not yet chosen someone. You had laughed at first. Then your expression had changed. You had looked toward the rain beyond the doorway and answered with words no one expected. You had said that sometimes the heart makes its choice before life becomes ready for it. The person you love felt the room tilt around them. They wanted to ask what else you had said, but too many eyes were watching. The new person across the table became quiet. The relatives who had encouraged this introduction now exchanged uncertain glances. What had begun as a carefully arranged evening suddenly contained a presence no one had invited, your unspoken place in the heart of the person they were trying to match with someone else. Still, that sentence alone was not what changed everything. The acquaintance had more to reveal. They explained that someone asked whether the person you had chosen knew how you felt. Your answer came slowly. You had said, "I don't think they know the whole truth. I gave them too many reasons to believe they did not matter." Those words entered the person you love like light through a locked door. For months, they had believed your distance was a decision. They had believed you stepped back because your feelings were not strong enough. They had replayed every delayed message, every unfinished conversation, every moment when you seemed close and then suddenly unreachable. Their pain had eventually hardened into an explanation: "You did not choose me." But what if that explanation had never been true? What if your distance had not been the absence of love, but the evidence of a struggle you had never revealed? The person you love could no longer pretend to be interested in the discussion before them. Their heartbeat became visible in the pulse at their throat. The new person noticed. With surprising grace, they placed their cup down and asked whether a break would help. That simple kindness made the person you love feel even more guilty. No one deserved to become a replacement for a story that had not ended. They rose and walked toward the hallway, saying they needed air. The rain had softened outside, leaving the garden shining beneath the porch light. They stepped through the back door and stood beneath the narrow awning, breathing in the cold night. Behind them, voices blurred into a low murmur. For the first time, they admitted the truth without defending themselves from it. They had not come to meet someone new because they were ready. They had come because they were wounded. There is a difference, and in that moment they finally understood it. Readiness looks forward with an open heart. Woundedness runs forward because looking back hurts too much. They had mistaken movement for healing. They had allowed themselves to believe that choosing someone else would silence the ache you left behind. But now, hearing that you believed they did not know the truth, they realized both of you had been living inside different versions of the same loss. You thought you had failed to show them they mattered. They thought their importance to you had only existed in their imagination. Two hearts had been grieving a misunderstanding neither one had possessed the courage to confront. The back door opened behind them. The acquaintance stepped onto the porch, closing the door gently so the conversation inside could not be heard. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then the person you love asked the question that had been burning through them since your name entered the room. What truth were they talking about? The acquaintance did not answer immediately. Their expression changed, and the hesitation frightened the person you love more than any direct response could have. They looked toward the dark garden, where rainwater slipped from the leaves in slow, bright drops. "You really don't know?" they asked. The person you love shook their head. The acquaintance exhaled, as though deciding whether they had the right to reveal something you had kept hidden. Then they said, "Before I tell you, you should understand that they never asked me to say any of this." In fact, I think they would be upset if they knew. That warning should have stopped the conversation. It did not. The person you love stepped closer. Please. Inside the house, someone laughed too loudly, attempting to restore the evening's earlier mood. A spoon touched the side of a cup. The clock continued counting toward a future that no longer seemed certain. The acquaintance reached into their coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, softened at the edges as though it had been opened more than once. They stared at it before holding it out. "This was not written for me," they said. "I found it among the papers they were carrying at the event. I tried to return it, but when I saw the first line, I realized who it was about." The person you love did not take it immediately. Their eyes remained fixed on the folded page. "What does it say?" The acquaintance's voice lowered. "It explains why they disappeared when you needed them most." Every defense inside the person you love collapsed at once. That absence had been the deepest wound. It was the moment that had convinced them your connection could not be trusted. They had waited for you, searched for an explanation, and eventually forced themselves to stop hoping. Now the explanation was inches away. Their hand trembled as they accepted the paper. But before they could unfold it, the acquaintance added one final sentence. "There is something else you need to know." The reason they left was not because they were uncertain about you. They left because someone made them believe that staying close to you would destroy the future you were trying to build. The rain seemed to stop. The sounds inside the house disappeared. The person you love looked down at the paper, then back at the acquaintance. "Who told them that?" The acquaintance turned toward the glowing window, where one of the relatives involved in arranging the marriage introduction stood watching them from behind the curtain. And in that instant, the person you love realized the truth was not only written on the page in their hands. It was sitting inside the house, waiting for them to return. "My beloved child." The silence between them lasted only a heartbeat, yet it carried the weight of years. The person you love looked through the rain-speckled window once more. Inside that warm house, conversations continued as though nothing had changed. Cups of tea were lifted, polite smiles returned, and plans for a future still lingered in the air. But none of those voices mattered anymore. The only sound they could truly hear was the question echoing inside their own heart. How much of my life has been shaped by a misunderstanding? With careful hands, they unfolded the letter. The paper was simple. The handwriting was familiar. Every word carried the honesty of someone who had written without expecting anyone else to read it. It spoke of difficult choices made in silence. It spoke of sacrifices that had never been explained because explaining them would have exposed burdens that were never meant to become someone else's weight. Most of all, it spoke of love, not the loud kind that demands attention, but the quiet kind that chooses another person's future over its own comfort. I walked away because I believed someone who loved you asked me to. They told me I would become the obstacle standing between you and the life you deserved. If they were right, then leaving was the only gift I could still give you. If they were wrong, then I pray one day you'll know my silence was never the absence of love. The words blurred through tears. Every memory that had once looked like rejection suddenly appeared different. The unanswered messages. The unexpected distance. the painful goodbye that had never truly felt complete. None of it had come from a heart that stopped caring. It had come from a heart carrying a burden alone. Slowly, they lowered the letter. The relatives standing behind the curtain realized the truth had surfaced. Their confident expression faded. They stepped outside, shoulders heavy with regret, no longer able to hide behind good intentions. "I never wanted either of you to suffer," they admitted quietly. "I thought separating you would protect both of you. I convinced myself that temporary pain would prevent a lifetime of disappointment." The confession hung in the cool evening air. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the person you love answered with remarkable calm. "You didn't just make a decision for us. You took away our chance to make it ourselves." Those words carried no anger. Only truth. The relative lowered their eyes. "I'm sorry. Sometimes the hardest apology to hear is the one we have waited for the longest. It does not erase the years. It cannot return missed moments. But it can unlock a door that has remained closed far too long." The person you love folded the letter carefully and placed it close to their heart. Then they walked back inside. Everyone expected them to resume the meeting. Instead, they thanked the other family with genuine respect. "You've shown nothing but kindness tonight," they said. "You deserve someone whose whole heart is free to choose this path. Mine isn't." The room became completely still. The person who had been introduced for marriage smiled gently. "I think," they replied, "the bravest thing anyone can do is tell the truth before making a promise." There was no bitterness. Only quiet understanding. Some meetings are meant to begin a lifelong relationship. Others are meant to reveal where the heart truly belongs. As the evening came to an end, the rain finally stopped. Clouds drifted apart, revealing a sky filled with patient stars. The person you love stepped outside one last time, holding the letter beneath the moonlight. For the first time in many months, they were no longer chasing answers. They had found them. The future was still uncertain. There would be conversations waiting. Explanations that could no longer be postponed. Forgiveness that would take courage. And perhaps tears before smiles. But uncertainty no longer frightened them. Because truth, even when delayed, gives hope a place to grow again. And somewhere beyond that quiet night, another heart was unknowingly looking toward the same horizon, wondering if it was finally safe to hope once more. Perhaps the greatest miracle in any love story is not that two people never lose each other. It is that truth finds them before their hearts forget how to recognize one another. So if this fictional story has reminded you to choose honesty over assumptions, courage over silence, and compassion over fear, carry that lesson with you. Sometimes a single conversation can change the direction of an entire life. May your path be filled with wisdom when choices seem difficult, peace when your heart feels uncertain, and hope that continues to shine even through life's longest nights. May you always have the courage to seek truth with kindness and to offer forgiveness when it is deserved. Thank you for sharing this journey. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who could use a little hope today. Until our next story, may peace, love, and light guide every step of your journey.